Welcome to another episode of the Silver and BlackCast. It's your brother Marquise here with your boy Rocco, and we're just two Raider fans here getting ready for the season opener in our preseason. I'm sorry, our week one. I know the season just gets so excited, man. I'm so excited. The preseason flew by quick, but with our week one preview of our opponents, the New England Patriots. So we are going to break this down very similar to how we do every other episode. We're going to have four downs, four segments just in four downs. First down, we're going to talk about some of the news and notes, what's happening in Raider Nation. On second down, we're going to take time to get to know our week one opponent, the New England Patriots. And on third down, we're going to talk a little bit about the keys to the victory, the keys to this game. And finally, we're going to focus on our fantasy projections and, as always, our fan questions. You bring the heat, and we will never punt on those questions. We got the answers. So gear up, Raider Nation. Smash that like and subscribe button because here comes another episode of the Silver and BlackCast. Let's get it.
Week one, baby.
Rocco, man. It's week one, baby!
Not preseason, brother. It's not preseason. Right. These are the real games now.
I'm telling you, I'm so used to saying preseason that I couldn't even say preview. But I'm so excited, man. This week one is going to be spectacular.
It's like
so
Christmas
let's hop right into
Sunday.
it.
Yeah.
Let's hop right into it. Before we get to the fun part, let's just talk about a few things that's happened over the last few days since we've had a pod. First, we've had a few transactions. The Raiders signed Jeff Driskell, the quarterback, to the practice squad. They also have signed Brian Asamoah, the former third-round pick, linebacker. They added to the active roster Brennan Jackson, the defensive end from the Rams, and also offensive lineman Stone Forsythe to the active roster. So anything of those four kind of stand out with you?
I'm interested to see Brennan Jackson, if he gets reps on defense. If he does, how we utilize them. Do we utilize him as a stand-up linebacker? Do we consider him an off-the-ball linebacker or more of an edge-type pass rusher? I believe he had 3 sacks in the preseason. So maybe he works his way into that rotation on obvious passing situations. So I'm excited to see him. I'm not too familiar with him, but I know he had a strong preseason, and I'm interested to see if he gets playing time. And if he does, how do we utilize him?
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I'm interested in him because, he was a 5th-round pick last year. At Washington State, he was more of a pass rusher. From everything I've read, they've used him in L.A. more of a linebacker, occasionally let him blitz and things like that. And he feels like he's a little bit more at home, being able to put his hand in the dirt and things like that. And we know there is a thin defensive line, especially at end, especially if there is something that goes down with Charles Snowden, the snowman. So if he does end up getting a suspension for that DUI earlier, then a guy like Brennan Jackson may end up finding an opportunity to carve himself out a little role. I'm also a little interested in Brian Asamoah, who was a former 3rd-round pick by the Vikings. He hasn't had a lot of production. He's a smaller linebacker, kind of a coverage linebacker. But I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do if he gets an opportunity.
I thought it was interesting that we signed Driskell just in a sense that he's an athletic type of quarterback, right? And Pete Carroll talked about they liked Pickett. One of the things they liked about him most is his athleticism. So I do find that interesting. I think Chip Kelly's had success with all different types of quarterbacks, and I think he's certainly capable of calling, a good offensive game with a more traditional pocket passer. But I do think he still does prefer an athletic quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the big statement there is that they really are doing everything in their power to not have to play Cam Miller. They're gonna trade for Kenny Pickett to be the number 2. They're gonna add a journeyman guy in Driskell, who is I think he has 16 touchdowns and 10 and 10 interceptions in 25 games in a 7-year career. So he obviously has not played very much. in his career. But they'd rather have him there immediately as a emergency quarterback than to allow Cam Miller to step on the field at this stage. And it's probably wise. Hopefully, none of them have to ever take a snap, but it's probably wise not this early in the season not to have to rely on a rookie from North Dakota.
Yeah, I don't think he's ready yet. And listen, that could change later in the season. Maybe they would feel more comfortable with him if, God forbid, the situation ever arises.
Yeah, and the last person that we didn't really talk about, but they did sign Stone Forsythe and releasing Thayer Munford. And with Stone Forsythe, obviously there's a lot of bad film out there on him, but he is a big, talented guy. Pete Carroll knows him intimately and obviously pounded the table to get this guy or someone who he must trust to play that swing tackle role.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I understand he struggled previously, but I feel like it's a little different when Pete Carroll's bringing him in and he's the guy that drafted him. He's the guy that coached him previously. So nobody knows him better than Pete Carroll. And he sees something in him. He wanted him as our potential swing tackle. And, that's good enough for me.
All right. Another thing that came out recently that's been fun, and it's more fun for the fans than it is probably realistic. But let's talk about the depth chart that just got released. Did anything stand out to you on that depth chart, Rocco?
A few things, yeah. The fact that Thornton was still listed as a starter, Cooper was second team. I don't know that it means anything, but Cooper was also second team listed behind Myers, not behind Thornton. Again, how much does that mean? I don't know. Booker was listed as the first-string defensive tackle ahead of Lelou. Again, what does it mean? And even if it does mean something, maybe Booker is a starter. Those guys are going to rotate so much anyways, right? And then Kai Blue Kelly looks like he won the starting cornerback job. I actually expect us to rotate the corners some as well. I think Porter will play as well. That caught my eye. Darnay Holmes at nickelback in the more traditional sense. And then we understand we're going to see a lot of Chin in that role as well when we go to 3 safety packages. And I think for the most part, the rest was about what would be expected.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I don't put a lot of credence into Amari Cooper being your number 2. I think that's more of a product of him being there, just getting there. I would expect if they feel like he's ready, that he's going to play a lot of snaps. They'll rotate those guys in. Thomas Booker being the starting defensive tackle. That's a good sign, I think, that him coming here, obviously Raider Nation was upset, up in arms about them trading away Jacorian Bennett for a guy that they've never heard of. And now this guy's worked and put himself in a situation where he may be your starting defensive tackle next to Adam Butler. And if he ends up being a healthy part of that rotation, then obviously the trade was more than worth it for a guy who, although talented, was not a fit for what our defense is going to do. And last guy, you said Caillou Blue Kelly. I think that's a perfect example of Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll preaches compete, and everyone has an opportunity. And now here's this guy who was a 5th-round pick from Baltimore, been bouncing, got cut, been bouncing around the league, and here he is, opportunity, and he grabbed the bull, took the bull by the horns, and now is going to be projected to be the starter outside corner. And if he keeps the job, it's all up on him now. If he plays well, he'll keep it. If he struggles, then he'll lose that job. But, as a player, that's all you can want from a coach is to get an opportunity. And Pete Carroll preaches that. Pete Carroll follows through with that. And Caillou Kelly is a perfect example of that.
Great point. We had talked quite a bit about how Pete Carroll, really lived up to his mantra. And this was the most competitive training camp, Raiders training camp I could ever remember, with all different guys getting all different opportunities with the ones, and it felt like there was real, true competition all through the roster. And Kai Blue Kelly winning that job is a perfect example.
Absolutely. Now, the last thing we want to talk about before we get to the fun part into second down, let's talk about the injury report. Now,
I'm having fun now.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, the Raiders practiced late today, so the injury report has not been released. But the projected injury report, in which you can imagine, is the two guys with hamstring injuries, and that's Caillou Blue Kelly and Kenny Pickett. And I'm interested to see how much work both of them got in. I would imagine that both of them are probably going to get a limited practice in. Hopefully, you see them get a full practice. But I would expect some limited practice going on for both those guys. But the biggest injury on the injury report is not from our sideline, but also from our opponent's sideline with the New England Patriots, and that's the injury to Christian Gonzalez, their star cornerback, who right now projections is that he will not suit up against the Raiders.
Yeah, I believe he hasn't practiced since July 28th, and he didn't practice again today. We'll see. I'm sure, he's one of the better corners in the league, and if there's a chance he could play, they're gonna take it to the last minute. But it's hard to imagine he's gonna play at this point, and that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate for him, but it's a big break for us. Yeah,
absolutely. And actually, I don't know if you saw, but some of the New England Patriots beat writers actually had some comments on Gonzalez not playing. And their comments were something to the tune of saying that if Christian Gonzalez has to miss a game, this is a good game to miss because the Raiders don't have any weapons outside of Brock Bowers to worry about. What do you think about that, Rocco?
Well, I think number one, if he can play, I think he may cover Brock Bowers. Actually, I've seen that thought thrown out there, and that makes a lot of sense. And number two, if the beat writers feel that way, they're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah, they're gonna. We'll see if it was a good decision to sit him out. So that takes us out of first down. On to second down.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, of course.
We're incredibly healthy going into week one.
Oh,
and not just going into week one, throughout the entire training camp, we've been incredibly healthy. So it's one thing to, game day to be healthy, and that's great. But it was even, twofold because we were healthy throughout camp and these guys were available to practice every day. And I believe a lot of that credit goes to Alex Guerrero.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I read a great article by Tashawn Reed. I knew he was around the building. I knew he was involved. I actually did not know he's officially on the staff, and this is the first time he's officially been on an NFL staff. He's the wellness coordinator, and this is Tom Brady's health guru. Brady credits him with helping him stay healthy and be able to play as long as he did, and they've become the best of friends. Started TB12 together and the whole thing. And actually, Belichick barring him from the facility, it was a big reason, a big part of their falling out, the falling out between Belichick and Brady. So I think it's great that Brady brought him over. Spytek, Carroll were open to bringing him on the staff. And he said that the training staff, the athletic support staff, all were very open-minded, and they're working great together. And his emphasis, it's football, it's a contact sport, there's going to be injuries, but his emphasis is preventing, the non-contact, soft tissue type of injuries. And I think the results speak for themselves. This is the healthiest training camp I could ever remember the Raiders having.
Yeah, let's knock on wood right now for what you're saying. But I agree. I mean, Pete Carroll even alluded to it about really being super healthy, only losing Lonnie Johnson and Aiden O'Connell at this point. Two guys who were in reserve roles to begin with. So you really were lucky. And to your point, may have less to do with luck and more to do with a great addition to the staff and Alex Guerrero. And, anybody who would know how to take care of the body might be a guy who played quarterback till he's in his mid to late 40s. So, and this guy kept him upright. And I'm sure that if Dr. O was here with us, he'd be able to tell you how hard it is to keep somebody healthy playing that sport, especially someone as old as Tom Brady was. So the work that had to go into his preparation, his keeping the body stretched, well hydrated with good nutrition, all those things that he's probably bringing to the Raiders. And obviously there's no tangible evidence, but it seems to be paying dividends right now for the Raiders when they look at their healthy roster. So hopefully that continues, and hopefully we can have this same conversation going into Week 9, and hopefully with an 8-0 record at that point as well. So let's go to second down. Second down, we're going to focus. Let's get to know our opponents. Get to know who are the New England Patriots today. Obviously, we know that the Super Bowl winning dynasty that was with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. However, who are they today? And like the Raiders, there is a lot of transition that's happened. The Raiders got new GMs, new coaches, new offensive and defense coordinators, and the Patriots aren't that far off. So it starts to me with the head coach, Mike Vrabel. You're talking about a guy who's got skins on the wall, maybe not as much as like a Pete Carroll, but he's over 500 record, 54-45 for his career. He's 2-3 in the postseason in those 6 years in Tennessee. He was the coach of the year in 2021, took the team to the AFC Championship game in 2019. He's a strong leader, defensive-minded guy, and because of that, these teams usually follow that same suit. And they're tough. They're always going to be a tough out. They're always going to be a team that competes, fights, and scratches and claws. So if anybody thinks you're going to get the old Patriots and there's going to be a walk in the park, then you've never met Mike Vrabel coach team.
Agreed. I have a lot of respect for Mike Vrabel. They're going to be very competitive. They're going to be very physical. We have to match their physicality. This is going to be a physical game. It's going to start in the trenches. We have to tackle well. We have to block well. All those type of fundamental things. They're going to be well coached, physical, tough, competitive, and we have to match them and exceed them and outplay them in all those areas.
Absolutely. I mean, if you watch typically Mike Vrabel's teams, they're not super explosive offensively. In his 6 years in Tennessee, he averaged about being the 19th rated offense, with averaging about 22.5 points a game. But defensively, they were always hovering around that top 10. Matter of fact, on average in the 6 years, they were the 13th ranked defense in points allowed. So they're constantly going to be, just like any defensive-minded coach, they're going to be a team that's going to that's going to focus on stopping the run, being tough, and getting after the quarterback. And that's what Mike Vrabel hangs his hat on. And that's why his teams have had success, because he's that tough-minded and he's a great leader. He is the guy actually that I was very interested in hiring as a head coach before the whole Pete Carroll and Ben Johnson fire started burning. He was a guy that I thought that maybe Tom Brady would be interested in bringing in, but when the Pats got rid of Gerard Mayo, it was kind of a foregone conclusion that he was going there.
Yeah. No, I have a lot of respect for him. I expect a dogfight.
That leads us to now their new offensive coordinator. Raider Nation, you might have heard of this guy before. I think his name is Josh McDaniels. Look, McDaniels did not have a good run in Denver when he was the head coach. He had just as bad, if not a worse, stint in Vegas as a Raiders coach. And I think that right now there's a lot of Raider fans. Oh, Josh McDaniels, he's terrible. He's the worst. Yeah, he's not a great head coach, but he's got a lot of skins on the wall, a lot of success being a good offense coordinator. In fact, I was mind blown when I kind of looked up his offensive stats, to be honest with you. I'm going to read some off to you before you go into your tangent about Josh McDaniels. And, don't be afraid to pull those punches back there, Rocco. I know how you feel about him. So in the 14 years as OC in his career, his overall average offense in points is 6th in the league. 6th. In 14 years, he averages being the 6th highest scoring offense. He, in the 14 years as an offensive coordinator, he's had 12 top 10 finishes. He's also had 10 top 5 finishes in those 14 years. So he's been able to choreograph some great offenses that score a lot of points, and he's been consistent. Consistent top 5, top 10 offense in the league wherever he's been, mostly in New England. A lot of that could be due to the fact that a lot of his coaching was under Tom Brady, but he has had success.
That's the key.
Yeah, it is, but you can't take that away from him either. It's like saying that Jerry Rice isn't as great because he had Joe Montana. So we can't take it away from him. We'll see if he can continue to do it with Drake Maye under center. But I got to give him his flowers. He, as an offense coordinator, he has proven to put together a heck of a resume.
Yeah, I don't want to take anything away from him. He was the play caller when Brady was there, and they did great things together, and he was a big part of that. If you look at all those numbers without Brady, they're not so hot. He was not good as a coordinator 1 year with the Rams. I want to say they might have been last in the league.
They were 32nd.
Okay. Wasn't a good coordinator with the Broncos, as we know. Wasn't so hot with the Raiders either. So I'm not trying to kill the guy. He can coach offensive football. I'm not gonna disrespect our opponent. I'm fully expecting a good game plan. I think Vrabel will have an influence on him. Obviously, we pinpoint and drill down on the coordinators, but the head coach is giving the instructions to the guys. So I would expect a heavy dose of the running game. I'm sure they'll be balanced, but Vrabel's always going to want to run the ball, and I think McDaniels will call those runs, and we need to be prepared to call the running to stop the running game. And I would also just say one more thing with McDaniels, and he used to drive me freaking crazy with this. He loves his trick plays. So we need to be prepared for the trick plays.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing about him is that he does typically try to adjust his scheme to exploit the defense, whether he's running the ball with power or zone offense or zone concepts, or most of his passes are more quick hitter screens, and then he takes his time to pick out the right time to dial up a deep shot. So the Raiders are going to have to be consistent in their rules, good with their eyes, and like you said, tackle. They do those things, then they give themselves a chance to win. Let's talk about the last addition they had. Terrell Williams, the new defensive coordinator in town in New England. This is a guy who served as the Lions defensive lines coach last year and the run game coordinator. But his history is really with Mike Vrabel in Tennessee. He was there as the assistant head coach and defensive line coach for 5 years. And during that time, they ranked 4th in the NFL in yards allowed, and they had the best rushing defense in the league, allowing only 76.9 rushing yards per game and 3.4 rushing average during his stint. So with him at the defensive line coach, they did an excellent job of stopping the run. So there's going to be an extreme focus right there on stopping Ashton Jeanty, and coming from both Mike Vrabel and their defense coordinator, Terrell Williams.
Yeah, I think that trickles down from Vrabel. It's just kind of what I talked about earlier, that there's just going to be a toughness factor, and that's a big part of obviously running the ball. They have a talented front seven. So, yeah, we're going to have to block it up, and maybe this is the type of game, we'll see. Maybe this is the type of game where you throw early. Maybe you throw early to set up the runs instead of vice versa. We'll see. We'll probably talk about this a little more. The beautiful thing is no one knows what to expect in week one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not only do we not know what to expect from the Patriots, we don't know what to expect from our own team, right? No. I can't wait to see.
I know what to expect.
I know. Yeah.
I expect greatness. That's what I expect.
Right. I do as well. How we're going to go around to getting that, I don't know exactly. I'm fascinated to see what the Chip Kelly offense looks, what Pete Carroll and Patrick Graham put together on defense, and obviously our opponents, what they do. That's the beauty of week one. Nobody knows what to expect, and it's going to be exciting.
Absolutely. So now that we've talked about the coaching staff, let's move on to the offensive depth chart for the Patriots. The interesting thing about the Patriots is, that's a little different from the Raiders, is that the Patriots, they have 4 new starters on that offensive line. So you're talking about Will Campbell, who is a top 5 draft pick for them, a rookie left tackle. They're hoping that he comes in and plays really well. But the only returner is Michael Onwenu, who might have even played a different position. I know they've moved him all over the field. Right now they got him as starting right guard, but I believe he played right tackle, left tackle, so he may not even be starting in the same position. But they also added a Morgan Moses, who's a journeyman right tackle, been a good player for most of his career. Garrett Bradbury, a smaller center, but has had some success in Minnesota and other areas. And then Jared Wilson at left guard. So they're starting 4 out of 5 new players on that offensive line. How do you think that's going to affect them early in the season?
It just depends on how quickly they could gel, right? You know, that unit, as much as, if not more than any other unit on your team, has to be cohesive. They have to work in tandem and have to work as a synchronized unit as a whole. And we'll see. You know, I think Will Campbell's I know he's a very talented left tackle. I'm sure they're very high on him and expect great things. I've always felt like, though, that's one of the toughest positions to play as a rookie. This is a rookie. His first game might be an opportunity for Crosby or Kuntz to go to work, you know, and maybe take advantage of the young guy.
Absolutely. Let's talk about their wide receivers. You got Stephon Diggs. Obviously, we know about him. He's had a long history of success in this league. Although there were some interesting things going on with him in the offseason, which I'll let you talk a little bit more about what your thoughts are, where he'll be at. Demario Douglas, Kayshon Boutte, and then backing those guys up, we have our boy, Mac Hollins back there. So what do you think about the wide receiver room they have going on?
I think I always like Mac Hollins. You know, I don't like him this week, but he had a really good year for us, and that was under Josh McDaniels as well. Yeah. You know, they're okay. Yeah. You know, what am I going to say? You know, they're okay. You know, it's a decent group. There's some depth there. I don't want to sound arrogant, but it's nobody that scares you to death. You know, maybe their most dangerous weapon might be a tight end with Hunter Henry, and I think also maybe the backs in the passing game.
Yeah.
You know, the wide receivers, you know, for our first game with our secondary might not be the worst matchup.
Yeah, that's a great point. To be honest with you, I was a little surprised that they didn't go a little bit harder in at the wide receiver. They must feel good about what they have. But a lot of times when you have a young quarterback like Drake Maye, who we'll talk about in momentarily, you know, teams like to try to surround them early with weapons. And the Patriots didn't go that route. They kind of focused more on the defense side, more true to who their head coach is. And we'll see if that works out for Drake Maye. But yes, I agree. I think that if you're going to have a matchup, this is the right matchup for our young cornerbacks to play against these guys. No disrespect to Boutte and to Stephon Diggs, because we've seen them all have great games, but you know, it's a good matchup for our secondary. You mentioned the tight ends, Austin Hooper and Hunter Henry. And Hunter Henry, I got to give him his props, man. He was their leading receiver and leading touchdown last year. That guy's been a thorn in the Raiders' side since he was back in San Diego with Phillip Rivers. So I give him his flowers, man. That guy's been a good player for quite some time. Austin Hooper had a cup of coffee with the Raiders and did some good things with him in that one season that they had. So their tight end room, I think, is maybe similar to us. Their tight end room is probably going to do the heavy lifting in their receiving game. So our linebackers better be ready to cover.
Yeah, I agree. Hunter Henry, very good, veteran, savvy tight end. He's been, just like you said, he's been doing it a long time, and yeah, he might be the number one target we have to cover, and like you said, Hooper's solid as well. So you might see some more 2 tight end sets, and you know, the linebackers and safeties, however we match that up, have to play good coverage.
Yeah, and that leads us to on offense, the running back room. You got Ramondre Stevenson, and then the other guy who's going to be doing the heavy lifting is a second round rookie. Some thought he might go in the actual first round, and that's Travion Henderson, who's electric in the preseason. And people are very, very excited about him. I know that people are going to be comparing right away. You're going to be looking at stats of Travion Henderson versus Ashton Jeanty and what they're doing in week one. Just the fact that both of them were highly drafted running backs. But from what I've seen, Ramondre Stevenson, he's still practicing with a non-contact jersey coming off an injury. Be interesting to see if he's going to be able to play week one. And that might just lend more room for Travion Henderson to carry the rock.
Henderson's dangerous. That's their most dangerous skill position player right there. He's super talented, and in a home run aspect, he's got the home run speed, and if he gets a crease and we take a bad angle, he could take it to the house. So to me, he's the key. We got to stop the run. I don't know if we'll get into this more. That includes Drake Maye. Drake Maye's a good athlete. Drake Maye likes to run, whether that's scrambles, design, quarterback runs. To me, first and foremost on defense, we have to stop the run, make them one-dimensional, and then go from there against a talented quarterback. But, yeah, it starts with Henderson and Drake Maye. Drake Maye in the running game. We'll see what Stevenson's health. I always thought he ran hard. He's a tough back too. So to me, first and foremost, it's all about stopping the run.
Absolutely. And that leads us to the last position on offense, the most important one, Drake Maye at the quarterback position. You're talking about a guy who's super talented. He was a top 3 pick. A lot of people thought he would be the number 1 pick overall going into 2024. Going into 2023 in college. They thought he would be the number 1 pick for in the draft. He ends up going number 3 and falling into the Patriots' lap. As a rookie, played about half the games, ended up with 15 touchdowns, 10 picks, threw for about 2,300 yards. The stats don't tell the story. He didn't have a lot of weapons around him. As we alluded earlier, I don't know how much they've improved those weapons, or at least if it will be you'll see a nominal difference or you'll see a big jump. But if you do see a big leap, I think it's more in the improvement of maybe the system to go along with Drake Maye's maturity as opposed to the people around him. He's a guy that has the skills and talent to be able to take over a game at some point. And hopefully the Raiders scheme up well enough where that point doesn't start until after week 1.
Yeah, he's very talented. One of the bright young, potential stars at the position. Had a very good rookie year under circumstances. Second year, they're expecting huge things from him. To me, if you could limit the running game like I spoke about, and that includes him. He is a good athlete, and he likes to scramble. He likes to look to run. Make him one-dimensional where he's got to drop back, and we know he's dropping back. Obvious passing situations. Maybe he gets his yards. Maybe he gets a good amount of yards, but I got to feel like he'll give us 2-3 opportunities maybe to make a play at the ball as well. It could be that type of game where, maybe he does rack up some yards, but we play well in the red zone and maybe get a couple picks as well. I see maybe that style of game playing out here.
Yeah, and then let's go flip sides to the defense side of the ball. The Patriots, they're going to play a little bit more of a 3-4 under Mike Vrabel. That starts with that defensive line, and you have two really good players right there, and that's in Christian Barmore, who's coming back from an injury. He was out most of last year, but he showed after his first couple years in the league how talented he was. And the big signing free agent they brought in from Philadelphia, Milton Williams, who is a pass rushing, get after the quarterback, can cause a lot of drama. For Geno Smith of our offensive line doesn't pay attention to him, and that knows they have Chris Tonga. What do you think about that defensive line that they got going on in New England?
It's going to be a very difficult test. It's imperative that Meredith and Barham and JPJ really hold up strong. Starting with the running game. Get a consistent push. Give Jeanty some room to operate, but even more so, especially with those two talented guys inside, there's nothing worse. There's nothing more detrimental to a quarterback than getting that pressure from the inside. So you gotta hold up strong at the point of attack there, so we could, build a pocket around Geno and he could operate. That's definitely one of the keys to the game.
Yeah, he that defensive line is definitely. We'll talk about keys later on, but that defensive line is definitely going to be a matchup that we're going to watch in the trenches. Now, if you move on to the linebacker, their interior linebackers are someone that we might be familiar with, and Robert Spillane, fan favorite for Raider Nation. We were all sad to see him go, but they did sign him to a $12 million annual contract, which is a lot more than John Spytek and them wanting to play for an off-ball linebacker. They also in middle got Christian Ellis, a guy that the Raiders actually tried to sign to an offer sheet to sign as a replacement for Robert Spillane. They keep both those guys. On the perimeter of those guys at the outside linebacker, Mike Vrabel brings back familiar face Harold Landry, pass rusher, had a lot of success in Tennessee, and another former Raider, K'Lavon Chaisson, who had a hell of a finish in Vegas. The last 4 or 5 games of the season, and now he matches them, and was named a specific game captain for this Raider game. And I'm sure a lot of that had to do with maybe some hard feelings and not being back in the silver and black. Yeah,
it's a strong front seven, like you said. I'm sure Chaisson and Spillane will have a little extra juice. It's a formidable front seven. So we got to block it up and execute. You gotta let Geno have time to execute the offense, especially first game. We need to find that rhythm. You don't want to be just out of sorts just because you can't block it up right off the bat, and you can never find your rhythm and start executing the way you wanted to right in week one, because it's difficult enough to hit the ground running to begin with. So you just don't want them really disrupting the game. It's a strong front seven. We got our work cut out for us.
Yeah, and that leads us to the secondary. They have starting Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez. We've already mentioned there's most likely Christian Gonzalez would be out, but Carlton Davis has been a talented cornerback, whether he was in Detroit, whether he's in Tampa Bay. He's had a great career thus far. He's still a younger guy, maybe in his upper mid to late 20s. And their rest of their secondary with their safeties are Jalen Hawkins and Craig Woodson. Kyle Duggar kind of fell out of favor there. He was a guy that they were very high on, had a lot of splash plays. If you remember, pick 6 against Derek Carr actually in Vegas, in that incredible finish game with Chandler Jones took the pass from Jacoby Myers back in the last play of the game. One of the craziest finishes I've ever seen. But I digress. Back to the point is that Kyle Duggar is kind of in that third or fourth safety role. Be interesting to see if they don't eventually find a trade for him or release that guy. But their secondary again has some skins on the wall. Missing Christian Gonzalez will be a big hurdle for them to overcome. But they do, like we said, have a talented defense, and one guy's not going to make or break that defense.
Yeah. It was surprising with Duggar. They also released Jabril Peppers, who I played well for them. In all honesty, I'm not too familiar with these safeties, but they liked them enough where they're starting over Duggar and Jabril Peppers. So that maybe should tell you something. I think they also have a good nickel. I'm not sure if you mentioned a Marcus Jones. This is real football now. You're going through the roster, and it's a tough challenge. Maybe we could take advantage of Gonzalez's absence if he doesn't suit up. That is the one thing I would say about that secondary. I never wish for that. I hope he could play. I want everybody's best, but if he can't, maybe we could take advantage there.
Absolutely. All right, that takes us to third down. And in third down, we're going to talk about our keys to victory, or our keys to why we could not get it done. So let's start with some areas of concern that we want to talk about. For me, there's 2 areas that I'm concerned the most about. And those areas are, one, Josh McDaniels' offense versus our secondary. Josh McDaniels, like, he's going to scheme some stuff up. You alluded to some trick plays. He's going to get the ball out of Drake Maye's hands fast to try to neutralize Max Crosby, which means our corners are going to have to tackle and have to have sticky coverage. If they sit there in a zone, there's a good chance they may get carved up with short routes and obviously ticky-tack themselves down the field. So I'm really concerned of the kind of scheme that he's going to put in versus our young secondary. The second area that I've concerned is stopping the run. You also alluded to Travion Henderson and how electric he is. We cannot allow him to have a day where he's 7 carries, 82 yards. It's one of those things. Excuse me. He has to be able to be neutralized. We have to limit the big plays, especially when he gets the ball, know where he is at all times. Those are my 2 biggest areas of concern. What about you, Rocco?
Yeah, I like those. I would also just piggyback on that with stopping the run for all 4 quarters, right? It's one thing, you come out, you're sky high, it's week 1, you're flying around like a maniac, and you're stopping the run in the first quarter, you're stopping the run in the second quarter. But you got to do it in the second half. You got to do it in the fourth quarter. It brings to mind last year the Chargers game, week 1, right? We were shutting the run down. We were shutting down that entire offense pretty much the whole game, and then at the worst possible time, they rip off a long touchdown run. I think they had 2 big runs late in that game to close it out. So stopping the run is a 60-minute job, right? I just wanted to point that out because he's got that home run, capability. If he breaks one, he's breaking one all the way to the house. So, yeah. Those are great keys. I'll just mention one more, and we already did, so I won't go too far in depth. Those 2 defensive tackles, we have to handle them. If we don't, maybe not necessarily outright win that battle, but at least handle them. At least where Genty could consistently, move to help us, get in third and manageable situations, and where they're not causing havoc with Geno and executing the passing game.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about a couple of these keys to victory. Now, if the Raiders lose, I think it's going to go down to those areas of concern. But if they win this game, it's going to be a couple things that I have written down here, and I'd love to hear your take on these as well. One, they have to, and this goes towards every game, but especially early in the season, you have to take care of the ball.
Yeah.
Both teams are going to be feeling each other out. We can't have early turnovers giving the other team short fields, making it easy on them. We're going to have to make, the defense is already very inexperienced on our side in the secondary. Let's make the Patriots earn every yard they get. Let's not have a fumble where a guy like Ashton Genty is fighting for extra yards and, gets the ball knocked out because he's trying to get every inch on the field. Although I love that aspect of him. Just take care of the ball. Geno Smith live to throw another day. Let's not put the ball in harm's way, because that's the quickest way to lose football games is by turning the ball over. Secondly, let's make sure that we run the rock and run it well. I think me and you have talked about this, about everyone thinks that we're just going to be a ground and pound team because that's what Pete Carroll wants. I don't think that's the case, but we have to be able to run the ball effectively. I don't think we need to see Ashton Genty carry the ball 25, 30 times. But to see him carry the ball 17, 18 times for 80 with 4.5, 5 yards of carry, that's when you're running the ball well. When it's 3rd and 5 and you feel comfortable handing the ball off to Ashton Genty like we saw in the preseason and him run for 7 yards, that's winning football. So we have to be able to run the ball with effectiveness, not necessarily with volume, but being effective with every run. And the last key I want to really talk about is making sure that we play with a chip on our shoulder and play with confidence. We have a lot of guys that were cast out, thought to be lost. This is the first game of the season. This is their culture builder. Everything that Pete Carroll's been preaching to these guys has to come to a head for to lock in that buy-in. So we've seen it many times. Every coach comes in and says, hey, you got to change the culture. You got to change the culture. Well, and everybody tries to buy into the culture. But you know what really helps you buy into culture? Winning. And when you lose, it makes you question whether this culture is the right thing, right direction for you. And I'm not saying that's going to happen in week 1. I'm not saying if they win or lose this game, that's going to solidify how people feel about Pete Carroll and his leadership. But what I am saying is, sometimes you need proof on concept. And when you've been preaching this competition and all off season long, it's nice to see you be rewarded with a victory. And then that kind of stuff can snowball into having a hell of a season. I go back to 2016 with that great season they had with Derek Carr. And I think that a big part of that magical season had a lot to do with us going to New Orleans, going for 2 to win the game in on the road in week 1. And if we had not pulled that off, who knows how that season would have snowballed in another direction. So that being said, come in there with a chip on your shoulder. People don't believe in you. People think you're trash. People think a lot of the players are washed. Come in there with the chip on your shoulder. Come in there with confidence of how good you could be and go ahead and take it to these guys.
Wow. Pete Carroll should maybe let you do the pregame speech.
I know I'm fired up, baby.
Yeah, that was really impressive. Yeah, I'm ready to run through a wall. Yeah, no, those are great keys. Turnovers. That's every game. But coming off of last year, our turnover differential, and you probably have the numbers. You're the numbers guy. It was abysmal last year. It was abysmal. So, starting a new season, we got to start that off the right way. Protect the football, like you said. Take the ball away from them. I would almost tie special teams into that a little bit. First game, no special teams mistakes, right? Don't somebody runs in the wrong gap or whatever. We give up a long return. Muff a punt. I don't even want to say these things out loud, but
I'm knocking on wood over here. I'm knocking on wood, baby.
What I mean? Special teams, first game. Let's not make any mistakes. Let's at least have special teams be a stalemate, if not an advantage. I like your point about the culture builder, and I would piggyback off that and saying, in this game, get off to a good start. Let's get off to a fast start in this game. I think that could go a long way. Listen, if we get down 7, we get down 10, it's not the end of the world. We could come back. We know that. But I think it would be very beneficial along the same lines as what you said. First game under a new regime, Pete Carroll being the culture guy, the culture he's built. If we could actually get off to a fast start in this game, it could go a long way.
Absolutely. And one last key I do want to add. I'd like to see the defense create multiple turnovers today.
Yeah.
Because, I think that we can agree that the defense, at least the back end, the secondary, is the big unknown. And, Pete Carroll really, he does this all the time, and I don't know why we doubt him. Most everywhere he goes with young cornerbacks that people never heard of, and it usually turns out okay. That being said, I'm petrified of those guys back there. And I would love to see them, even if it became a situation where it was the type of defense where it bend, boom, turnover. Or maybe you break a couple times and bam, a turnover. We've seen those defenses be effective. The teams that are opportunistic with and sacks at the right moments sometimes are better than those defenses that constantly get stops, because those team turnovers change games, change the momentum. So we need to be able to get a sack. Max Crosby, I'm calling you out. You're a hell of a player. I love you. I love you. I love you. You're on my wall with the jersey, picture, everything.
Okay.
I love
this
that
is
guy.
the second pregame speech. Okay.
But he's got to do more. He's got to do more. He's got to create more turnovers. Okay. If he's going to take that step, he's got to get some forced fumbles. And that's what I want to see him with Drake, man. I want to see some sacks. I want to see him get some strips, and I want to see us come up with the ball. And, I think those two, if we're able to force a couple turnovers, that might be the difference in us winning that game.
Dude, I'm ready for the second half. I love your pregame speech. I love your halftime speech. I'm fired
All right.
up, yeah.
Well, that being said, we're going to get to a part that you love even more. Let's go with our fantasy projections. I know how Rocco loves some fantasy football, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll be back in a couple of minutes. I'm gonna go.
All right, guys. We're gonna make this quick because we don't want to lose Rocco too long. But let's talk about a couple guys in fantasy football. I know all you guys got your money down in your leagues. Some of you in 2, 3, 4 leagues. Let me give you a little hint on what's going to happen from the Raiders side. Let's start with Ashton Jeanty. All right, what we expect here, the Silver and BlackCast, 82 rushing yards, 4 receptions for 27 yards. Not sure he's going to get in the end zone in week 1. Don't you worry. He's going to get plenty of them this year. But that, in a standard PPR league, that's about 14.9 yards, 14.9 points this week. Moving on to our second guy, Geno Smith. Geno Smith, we're projecting 242 passing yards, 16 rushing yards, and two tutties in the air for Geno Smith. That should give you about a 14.44 points in standard PPR league, and it should be a solid QB2 for week 1. That leads us to Jakobi Meyers. Jakobi Meyers, I think he's going to have a decent day. We've heard all the talk about him wanting a new contract. We've heard about he feels like he's earned it, but the team does not agree. His words, not mine. But I think he does what he does day in and day out. Come to work. And with 5 receptions, 57 yards, and a tutty, that giving him 16.7 points for week 1. A solid wide receiver 2, maybe wide receiver 1. Amari Cooper. I know it's a big name, guys, but he just got to Las Vegas. He's just getting himself involved in the offense. I expect about 4 catches, 39 yards. Nothing huge for Amari Cooper, but just the beginning for a good season for him, and should give you about 7 points, 8 points if you're in a PPR league. Down to the last couple. Brock, the natural Bowers. This guy's special. And the Patriots know it. Everyone knows it, and it doesn't matter. You can't stop him. The guy's incredible. He's going to come out with 6 catches, 86 yards, and a tutty. Give that guy 20-plus points and cemented himself as tight end 1 for week 1 of the regular season. Now, don't forget about our boy, the kicking and defense, special teams matters. Our guy, Cash Money Carlson. Unfortunately, I think the field goals are a little too high. I'd like to see a little bit more extra points, but I do respect that Mike Vrabel defense, and I do think they're going to limit how many times we get in the end zone, which means Daniel Carlson's going to have to show up, kick the ball well, and I think he will. With 4 field goals, 2 extra points, giving them a big day, 18 points out of Cash Money Carlson as he makes his bid for a new contract. And lastly, let's talk about that defense. Defense wins championships, and I think the Raider defense is going to do a great job keeping the Patriots under 24 points, adding 3 sacks, an interception, and a fumble recovery. We talked about getting 2 turnovers or more, and I think the Raider defense comes through with that with a good 11-point day in fantasy football. So if you want to have a good day, draft some Raiders and make sure you put them in your lineup for week 1 against the Patriots, because a lot of guys are going to show out. That leads us to final session, our questions in 4th down. First question of the day. You have anything you want to add to fantasy football there, Rocco?
I think all those individual numbers were way too low. That's all I'm going to say.
I like it, and I agree. 500 yards for Geno week 1. All right. Question number 1 we have here. In what area, Rocco, do you think the Raiders will surprise in week 1?
I think it's a good question. I think I'm of the mindset week 1 you don't know what to expect. So, like, to me, whatever happens is going to be a surprise to an extent. I'm going to say this to answer the question. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what Chip Kelly's offense looks like. And I think
good one.
I think everyone believes, coming off Ohio State, he's kind of evolved, and, his system is more like a traditional NFL system now, and it's going to be a lot of 2 tight end sets and maybe some bigger personnel groupings, slowing down the tempo. And I agree. I think we'll see a lot of that. I think we might see more old school, up-tempo, spread Chip Kelly than people might think. I think he might sprinkle in some no huddle. I think he's going to surprise you with getting Geno Smith involved a little bit in the running game. Geno Smith's a good athlete. He's a better athlete than people think. That quarterback running game, those design runs are lethal. They're so hard to stop. It just becomes a numbers game now. You have 10 blockers instead of 9, right? So I'm going to answer it that way. I think Chip's going to surprise you. I think he could surprise you in a lot of different ways. I think he's very creative, and I think the base of his offense will be more of a traditional NFL style system, but I think you'll see some more of that old school Chip Kelly than you think.
Yeah, I like it. I think the surprise for me is going to be the cornerbacks. I think the cornerbacks are going to be a little better than we think. I think they're going to make plays and make Raider Nation feel a little bit more comfortable. And again, I alluded to earlier, that's just what Pete Carroll does. He coaches these guys up. And, the guys who aren't household names become household names under Pete Carroll. So I think the cornerbacks are going to come out there week one. We know that's a big question mark with that defense. And I think they're going to come out there and surprise some people. All right, what else you got? Let's see. Next question up we got here. It says, will a DB play a majority of the snaps, or do you think it's going to be a healthy rotation?
Will ADB? I think there's going to be some rotation. Yes. I think Porter's going to rotate in. I think you might see Richardson maybe a little bit. I think Kaibu Kelly and Darian Porter will rotate quite a bit. As far as the safeties, I would expect Palomalo to play the entire game. I would expect Chin, whether it's at safety or at nickel, I would expect him to be out there pretty much every snap. And I think pretty much the same goes for Stokes. Maybe Richardson rotates in a series or two there, but I think Stokes will play the majority of the game as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that also one person you didn't mention, I would expect to see that Terrell Edmonds gets called up off the practice squad, and him be a part of that secondary as well. But we'll see what happens there. I do think that Caillou Blue Kelly, if healthy, is going to end up playing a lot more snaps than people anticipate. I think you're going to end up maybe like an 70-30, 80-20 split with like a Darian Porter. So I do think there'll be a rotation, but I think eventually a few games in that rotation is going to become less and less as people start to separate themselves with their play. Next up, what we got here? It says here, what DT will take the bull by the horns and demand a starting role? Good question.
I like them all, and I'll give you a name to answer the question, but I would just say they're all going to play. So yeah. That's it's going to be a heavy rotation, and I think that's the beauty of what we have at the defensive line, especially defensive tackles. We have a lot of guys. We have a lot of talented guys, and I think they're going to take advantage of that fact and keep a heavy rotation and bring them in waves and keep them fresh and wear down offensive lines. But to give you a name, I'm going to say Jonah Lulu. I've been saying him, I think, since the first podcast. I like them all. I expect them all to play well. But if you want one name of somebody who's really going to stand out, I'm going to say Lulu.
I like it. I'm going to go with Booker. I think Booker is going to come in there and cause some havoc in there with Adam Butler. And look, the guy is a talented guy was buried in Philadelphia under a great defensive line. And now this guy's getting the opportunity to shine. I'm looking forward to seeing if, given the opportunity, he can do what Lane Johnson said. Lane Johnson thought that with right coaching, the right situation, he's a Pro Bowl caliber player. And I'd like to see that come to fruition. Next question. Will Tyree play more inside or outside rusher?
As a rusher, inside.
And so you see him playing more inside, more D tackle than D in?
As a rusher. Overall, it's maybe 50-50 or maybe even more so outside. But I think on obvious passing downs, he's going to be inside.
Yeah, I agree with that. And unfortunately, we didn't mention him much. I really do think he's going to be in for a big season. I think that he's kind of trending in the right direction and really started to figure it out in year 3. And I'm expecting a really big season out of him. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him. He's one of the guys on my top 5 list that I'm excited to watch because I do think that we're going to see a different player than we saw in week 1 and week 2. Year 1 and year 2. Last question of the day. We got here. What is your score prediction for week 1, Rocco? And you got to tell me why. I'm
going to say the Raiders are going to make a little bit of statement that they're for a real good football team. Week one, I don't want to get carried away, but I'm going to say they're going to win by 2 scores. I'm going to say 28-17 Raiders.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
Big win in Foxborough, according to Rocco. I'm going to be a little bit more conservative, and I'm going to say that the Raiders win that game 26-23. With the Pats kicking a late field goal to make it closer than it was. But I do think it's going to be a close game. You got two teams that are similarly trajectory, similar in their lifespan as far as adding new coaches, new GMs, similar in their talent level, I believe. And I think the difference is going to be I think we just have a little bit more playmakers, a little bit more that New England doesn't have. And I think those playmakers are going to step up in the big moments and win a close game for us. So that's it, Raider Nation. Preview for week 1 of the Raiders season. So we appreciate you signing on. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. And remember, win, lose, or tie, Raider Nation till we die. Just win, baby.
Just win, baby. 1-0.
1-0.